Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans and you're watching the John Cedars channel from the bunker. And in this video, we absolutely must talk about a hilarious video that was shown at Jehovah's Witness meetings a couple of weeks ago, but has now been leaked online. And wow, it warns Jehovah's Witnesses about unauthorized apps and unauthorized websites, specifically apps or websites that are set up by evil apostates. You simply have to see this. Let's roll the first clip.
Are you confused by the number of JW apps in the mobile app store? Maybe a brother or sister has shown you an app saying it works great. Some seem to be designed for Jehovah's Witnesses, but are not provided by the faithful and discreet slave. What dangers are there with unauthorized apps for mobile devices? First, it's very important to know the source of the information it provides. It is also important to ensure that it comes from the faithful and discreet slave.
It is important to ensure the source of the information, because we want to make sure that all our information is coming from the faithful and discreet slave. That's the only safe place for information when it comes to Jehovah's Witness beliefs. Fascinating. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't even aware of there being too much of an issue with JW apps giving witnesses the truth about the truth, or information that debunks their beliefs. I guess it's enough of a problem to be the very first thing that is warned about in this video, to the extent where a radioactive symbol flashes on the phone. Gosh, do these apps make your phone radioactive? That's what I want to know. But yes, apparently Watchtower is terrified about Jehovah's Witnesses getting information from places other than 8 dudes in New York who make up the governing body. That's what all of this is about. It's about information control. If you can control someone's information, if you can control what they know and what their perception of reality is, then there's a good chance you can control the person. But it doesn't end there.
Some unauthorized apps may include low-quality information that is only partially correct. Remember, if it's just 10% correct, it is 100% misleading. Other apps may even be written by those who intentionally promote false information with a malicious intent. The authors of these apps can be like the bird catchers that the prophet Jeremiah described as setting a deadly trap. Their information can be spiritually damaging.
Just so much to talk about just in those few seconds. If it's 10% incorrect, it's 100% misleading. Wow. I mean, the hypocrisy there is just astounding. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, perhaps you're a Jehovah's Witness who stumbled on this video and you're thinking, well, of course, all of our literature is completely correct and factual. Go to JW Facts and the page titled Misquotes, Deception and Lies, where Paul Grundy does a great job of compiling just a sampling of clear examples of the organization lying or misleading people, giving unfactual information. And as you've heard there from the lips of the society, if it's 10% incorrect, it's 100% misleading. We'll find out some of the examples of the organization being 100% misleading, and there's quite a few. One immediate example that springs to mind for me, because I wrote about it extensively at the time, is the January 2015 Awake magazine, which opened right out of the gates with a misquote. So a scientist, the biologist Rama Singh, was misquoted in the Awake magazine that was originally printed, so that it sounded as though he was against evolution. And he got wind of this misquote and complained about it. And the organisation simply removed that sentence or that paragraph so that you couldn't see anymore. They didn't apologise publicly as they should have done. They should have issued a redaction and said, we'd like to apologise to Dr. Rama Singh. We understand that he is not against evolution. We apologise if we've misquoted him, blah, blah, blah. They did none of that. They incorrectly quoted a scientist, and the purpose was to be 100% misleading. So I was just blown away by them saying this. And quite frankly, what this whole video represents is Watchtower doing the thinking for Jehovah's Witnesses. So Watchtower is saying to Jehovah's Witnesses, we don't want you reading this information. Trust us, it's incorrect, it's wrong, it's misleading. But we don't want you to find that out for yourselves. We don't trust you to think this through, to analyse the claim that's being made here, to find some examples of apostates lying and draw your own conclusions. We don't trust you to do that. We're doing your thinking for you. And if you're a Jehovah's Witness watching this video, and there will have been millions watching this video at their meeting, I think it was a local needs item 2 weeks ago, you should feel insulted that you're not allowed to do your own basic thinking and your own basic evaluation as to the merits of certain arguments that are put forward. As for this stuff about the bird catcher and apostates being bird catchers who put out wrong information with malicious intent, well, again, why aren't witnesses being allowed to reach that conclusion for themselves, to sample some of the information and find out for themselves whether it's wrong? And even if you were to find information, it's not inconceivable, because there's lots of apostate websites and lots of apostate YouTube channels. I'm guessing there are some apps, although again, I'm not an expert in that area. It's not inconceivable to me that somewhere amidst all of the apostate websites and all of the apostate YouTube channels, someone has said something that is wrong, that isn't quite right, or is outright unfactual. But it's one thing to say, oh, there's a chance some of it may be unfactual, but it's another thing to say it's with malicious intent. It's quite conceivable to me that an apostate could say something that's wrong with the best motives in the world. Maybe something's just slipped their mind, or they haven't double-checked a quote or something or other. And their intention is to get to the bottom of things. Their intention is to establish what's true, but it hasn't quite worked. They've said something that's wrong. That doesn't mean that everything else that they have to say is therefore wrong. It certainly doesn't make them some kind of bird catcher. And I found this quite a manipulative analogy, because what's happening in people's minds as they're seeing this analogy is they're thinking, oh, the cute little bird. Who'd want to catch a cute little bird like that and put it in a cage? That's the sort of people apostates are. It's just so manipulative, isn't it? I wouldn't dream of doing something like that to a bird, and I wouldn't dream of intentionally misleading someone. I've almost certainly, in my 9 years of activism, said something at some point that was incorrect. In fact, I definitely have. Can't think of any immediate examples. But I'm only human. I'm going to make mistakes. But you can't tell me that my intention was malicious. You're making a claim that requires evidence, and there's no way the organisation can prove what people's intentions are. And as for the part about information being spiritually damaging, well, that's inevitable, isn't it? If you feel that you have the truth and you encounter information that debunks your beliefs, that proves to you that actually you don't have the truth, then your spirituality, as far as that particular set of beliefs is concerned, is going to evaporate. It's going to be dismantled. You're going to lose it. But that doesn't mean you're going to wither and die like this bird in this bird catcher's cage. It just means that you have, in a way, the adventure of figuring out what the truth is. Okay, I've been lied to here. They got me. They fooled me into thinking that Armageddon was coming in 1975, or that Armageddon was coming before the generation that witnessed the events of 1914 died off. They got me time and time again with all of these false claims. But now I get to carry out my own investigation. Now I get to figure out what my actual beliefs are and make sure that they are as grounded in fact and truth as possible. And if it turns out that there's certain areas of human knowledge in which there are no firm answers, it's okay to say we don't have all the answers. It's okay to say we don't have absolute truth. We don't know everything. In fact, that's quite a humble position to take, in stark contrast to the attitude of the governing body, which is to say we know everything. We are spokespersons for Jehovah. He has given us his Spirit. He guides us through his Holy Spirit. And everything you need to know is in our publications. That's the attitude they have. And it's a haughty attitude. And as we're seeing here, all they're interested in is controlling people and making sure that they are the only channel of information.
What about internet websites that are not sponsored by the faithful and discreet slave? It's important to remember, anyone can put anything on the internet. Some websites and social media websites that claim to be for Jehovah's Witnesses may also provide information that is misleading. What we read can even expose us to apostate ideas. A website may also ask for personal information. This can put your privacy or personal identity at risk.
So again, you have the flashing radioactive signal. Apparently your laptop or your browser becomes infected with radiation. I mean, surely that's inaccurate information. Surely it's an inaccurate use of the international symbol for radiation. And as we know, if something is only 10% wrong, it's 100% misleading. So it's a misleading use, you could say, of the radiation symbol. But wow, they say anyone can put anything on the internet. I agree entirely. And the same applies to jw.org. Anyone can put anything on jw.org, whether or not it's true or untrue. And as I've already mentioned, when you do some digging on this, you find that there are multiple examples of scientists being misquoted, of historians being second-guessed, of things being said that just aren't true or are inaccurate or are pure speculation. They do it all the time when you actually stop and objectively start appraising some of the claims that they're making. So for them to point the finger at apostates and depict us with this crazy kind of hooded persona, I mean, what even is that? I've met a lot of apostates in my years since leaving the organisation. And I have to say, viewers, I have yet to meet a single apostate who looks like a cross between the Lone Ranger and Emperor Palpatine. It just hasn't happened yet. So where they've got this image from, but again, it's scaremongering, isn't it? Like with the radiation sign and the loud blaring klaxon, they are trying to terrify people. They're trying to scare witnesses into thinking that somehow they're going to get infected. They're going to wither and die like a bird that's been caught by a bird catcher. There's possible radiation involved. And there are these apostate bogeymen who are skulking around in the shadows wearing eye masks and black hoodies. Amazing, isn't it? If this isn't kind of overt manipulation, and again, Watchtower trying to do the thinking for Jehovah's Witnesses on their behalf, I don't know what is. And there's an extra helping of hypocrisy when they start talking about privacy.
A website may also ask for personal information. This can put your privacy or personal identity at risk.
Wow. I mean, we've done an entire Watchtower in Focus episode on the publisher ID system. Basically, all Jehovah's Witness publishers have to be on this global database called Publisher ID, which keeps so much information, so much personal information on ordinary rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses that can and will be used against a witness if they ever put a foot wrong or they ever do something that the organization objects to. There are certain positions within the organization that you cannot aspire to unless you consent to having your records kept on this database. So you can't be a pioneer, you can't be a ministerial servant, you can't be an elder. It's literally a case of the Almighty saying, I'm not going to let you serve me unless you give all of your personal information to this organization. That's apparently what Jehovah's saying to Jehovah's Witnesses. And this information gets stored by Jehovah's Witnesses indefinitely. It even gets stored when you leave, when you're either disfellowshipped or disassociated. An S77 notice of disfellowshipping or disassociation goes to the organization, and they still have all of the latest information as to what happened. And if you think about what would be on that kind of document, any sins that you're perceived to have committed will go on this database. And there's no way of ensuring that you can either, number one, have this data deleted, or number two, retrieve it. I mean, you can ask them, and in certain countries, Watchtower is legally obliged to respond to your request and divulge the information or delete it. But what we've found routinely is that the organization simply says, we've deleted it, take our word for it. And you just have to take it at face value that your information is no longer being held. But if you are a Jehovah's Witness and you're watching this and you're thinking, I'm sorry, this is all misleading information, there's no way that the organization would be so invasive with people's privacy and with people's personal data, even though this is what they're accusing apostates of doing. And again, I'm not really aware of it. Is there a single website that says, oh, welcome, new user, please give us your date of birth and telephone number? And maybe there is a website out there, viewers, but I'm not aware of any. So yeah, that's very strange. But there is a section in chapter 25 of the Shepherd book, the Shepherd, the Flock of God book, which elders have. And I'm going to read to you paragraph 14 under the heading Assisting Inactive Ones, to ensure that inactive ones are not overlooked. So this is someone that's faded from the organization. Maybe they don't want to be disfellowshipped or shunned. They just want to fade out of the organization without causing a fuss. The Congregation Service Committee should assign each one of such to a field service group. You still get assigned to a field service group, even though you're inactive. Though the names of inactive ones should not appear on any list that is posted on the information board, the group overseer and his assistant should be made aware of the person's circumstances and contact information. It's right there in black and white. And they're accusing people like me, apostates, of harvesting information. We're talking here about someone who's gone inactive, who's faded out of the organization, who doesn't want to make a fuss. They just want to move on with their lives and not be shunned. And this is saying, assign them to a field service group. Make sure that the group overseer has their contact information so that he can check up on them spiritually from time to time. This is the organization we're dealing with. An organization that until recently in Europe, and I understand this still happens to some extent at least in America, where when witnesses would call on a householder, they would take copious notes about people's private information. Oh, met Mr. Smith. His dog is called Rover. He is an accountant. His children are called Joe and Michelle. And you'd write all of this stuff, wouldn't you, as a Jehovah's Witness when you called on someone? All personal information that this individual has not consented to. That's the nature of the religion, and now they're starting to climb down from that, and in Europe, witnesses are no longer allowed to do that. But that's the sort of organization that we're dealing with, one that has a long history of harvesting people's personal information to use as it sees fit. And here they're pointing the finger. They have the cheek to point the finger at apostates and say, this is what they do.
How can you know if an app or website is from the faithful and discreet slave? Ask yourself, have I seen this app or website mentioned in our publications? Has the governing body specifically recommended that we use it? Electronic tools like JW Library and jw.org are powerful and accomplish good. As we use them, our appreciation grows for the healthy spiritual food they give us. Use them freely, while being very cautious about other mobile apps or websites. Follow the advice at 1 Thessalonians 5:21 to make sure of all things, especially making sure that any mobile apps or websites we use are the genuine article, spiritual food from the faithful and discreet slave.
Well, first of all, what a cringy video. I mean, no wonder they haven't put this yet on their website or shown it on JW Broadcasting. I can well imagine why they would want to have this only as a local needs and not something that people could freely access on their website, because it's deeply embarrassing for anyone watching it who isn't conditioned to think that this is normal, who isn't conditioned to think, yeah, it makes total sense that the governing body gets to do my thinking for me and only they get to decide what apps or websites I'm allowed to use. You have to be conditioned into that mindset for this video to make any sense whatsoever. Hopefully to all outsiders watching this rebuttal, it's just a cringe fest, isn't it? But I love the final scripture that they chose. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 21, make sure of all things, hold fast to what is fine. I'm not religious. I don't hold personally the Bible to be a book of divine revelation. However, I can fully support these words. If you are a Jehovah's Witness, you need to make sure of all things. You need to figure out what's fine, in other words, what's true. And you don't do that simply by taking everything that the governing body tells you at face value. That is not a satisfactory way of deriving truth, of making sure of anything. You need to be able to hear both sides of the argument. Maybe apostates are trying to mislead you. Maybe they are lying to you. You will never know, because you're not allowed to go on their websites or use their mobile apps, which I didn't even know were a thing anyway. You're not allowed, are you, to go on their website? So how do you know whether they're lying? You are literally being forbidden from applying 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 21, because you're not allowed to make sure of all things. You're not allowed to hear both sides of the argument. Okay, I know what my beliefs are. I know what Watchtower says. What are the counter-arguments? What do critics have to say? Because if what I have is the truth, it should stand up to anything that they have to say. I should be able to refute any argument they throw at me. And having gone through that process, my faith will be stronger. So as I've said many times in my videos, it's a win-win thing when you do this. It's a win-win thing to examine your beliefs objectively as a Jehovah's Witness. Because if they're true, your faith will come out of that investigation process rock solid. It will be unmovable from that point forward, because you'll have seen what apostates are saying. You'll have seen that they're lying to you. You'll have seen that they're misleading you. And you won't need to keep doing that process over and over again. You've tried. You've seen what they have to say. It's not true. But what if it is true? What if they aren't lying? What if the organization is fooling you, is exploiting you? What if the organization has a long track record of failed predictions, of getting it wrong theologically, of exploiting people, of using people, of allowing abuse to flourish, of contradictions, of misquotes, of lies? Where do you expect to find that information? On Watchtower Online Library? On JW Library? Are you going to have an article in the Watchtower written by the faithful slave saying these are all the times we've lied to people? These are all the examples of us using misquotes to misrepresent scientists? Of course not. They are going to gloss over all of that. That information will only be available through critics like me, through apostates. The only way to know for sure which side you're on, whether you really have the truth or not, is to do that objective research. And it's a win-win, because either you make your faith stronger or you finally regain control of your mind. So wow, what a fascinating little video that is. I'm sure we'll be talking about that for a long time to come, but I just had to make a short rebuttal to that. Many thanks to Stephen Klein on Twitter for leaking this material so that we could all talk about it. I had heard a few clips that were sent to me on social media and certain bits of audio that sounded really crazy, but I thought I'm going to hang on until the video itself gets leaked. And sure enough, it was after only a couple of weeks. So I'm thrilled about that. I hope you found this video interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to the John Cedars channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.